Today we're going to do an adaptation of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving, and it is illustrated by Russ Flint. I want you to pay attention to the differences between the children's story, the Disney version, and the actual story that we will read starting tomorrow. On the eastern bank of the lazy Tappan Zee River, nestled between two mountain peaks, rests the small valley of Sleepy Hollow, which abounds with strange and wonderful happenings. Most remarkable of these is the legend of the ghost who haunts the region. The ghost is said to wear a long woolen cape like a trooper from the Revolutionary War. Each night he leaves his churchyard grave and hurries to the site of the long-forgotten battle. Riding his huge horse, the ghost is in a body in a frantic search of his head, lost in a raging battle. He is known as the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow. Into this sleepy little community came a new schoolmaster, Ichabod Crane, appropriately named. He was tall and thin, with long, skinny arms and legs, with one leg tucked up under his body. He could easily have been mistaken for a crane. Ichabod made little money for his services, so local parents took turns letting the schoolmaster live with them. To earn extra money, he gave singing lessons to the young ladies in the community. He often had dinner with his pupils and their families. After dessert, he and the women gathered around the fireplace to exchange marvelous and frightening ghost tales. In particular, they told tales of the Headless Horseman. The excitement of the stories, however, turned into terrifying memories during Ichabod's walk home. Ichabod trembled at dark shadows and unrecognizable shapes. He would freeze, listening for galloping hooves, then, realizing it was only the wind in the trees and not the Headless Horseman, he would continue on his way. Ichabod had a secret wish. He longed to live in one of the valley's huge farmhouses, and he hoped to marry into a family who owned one. One of the Sleepy Hollow's wealthy farmers had a daughter who was not yet married, and Ichabod gave her singing lessons. Ichabod was determined to make this student, Katrina Van Tassel, his wife. Unfortunately for Ichabod, Katrina already had a suitor. He was tall, with a huge chest and muscular arms. His name was Brom Van Brunt, but because of his great strength, his friends called him Brom Bones. Everybody loved Brom, and he loved practical jokes and pranks. When the local folks awoke at midnight and heard horses galloping past their farmhouses, they smiled at the whooping and hollering and exclaimed, "There goes Brom Bones and his gang." A silent feud arose between Brom and the schoolmaster as they competed to win Katrina's hand. Ichabod tried to impress Katrina with his intellect and singing, while Brom tried to embarrass Ichabod. One sunny autumn day, a messenger arrived at the schoolhouse and invited Ichabod to a party that evening at the Van Tassel farmhouse. Ichabod dismissed school early and ran all the way home. He shaved, washed, combed his hair, and put on his only suit and a wool hat, making certain he looked his very best. Then he borrowed a horse and saddle from his host. Ichabod mounted old Gunpowder, gave him a kick, and took off to the old Van Tassel farm. Shortly after Ichabod's arrival, Brom Bones rode up in front of the farmhouse and dismounted his horse, Daredevil. The fiddler soon started the music, and Ichabod, believing himself to be a wonderful dancer, led Katrina to the dance floor. He bobbed and bounced and twitched and turned and twirled. Meanwhile, watching the dancers, Brom Bones glared with jealousy. When the dance ended, Ichabod joined a group of people on the porch who were telling tales of the Headless Horseman. Someone said that in the nightly search of his head, the ghost tied up his horse among the graves in the local churchyard. The church stood in a small hill where a nearby stream trickled over the road. Across the stream lay a wooden plank bridge, shaded by thick overhanging branches. Local folks agreed that the bridge was where the Headless Horseman was most often met. Brom Bones joined the group and claimed that one evening he was overtaken by the horseman, whom he challenged to a race. Brom and Daredevil were winning until the horseman reached the wooden plank bridge and the headless ghost vanished in a pillar of fire. Ichabod listened intently to the stories until the party broke up. As the guests began to leave, the schoolmaster lingered behind. Today he intended to ask for Katrina's hand. Ichabod crept up to Katrina's side and whispered something to her. Startled, she squealed and quickly drew away from Ichabod. Poor, embarrassed Ichabod turned red, scowled, and stomped out of the house. He quickly mounted Gunpowder, gave him a kick, and spurred the horse into action. It was past midnight as Ichabod traveled toward a temporary home. As he thought of the evening's events, all the scary stories and ghostly tales began to return. He stopped, thinking he heard a whistle, but it was only the wind rushing through the trees. He heard a groan, but it was only two branches rubbing together. Then, out of the shadows, there rose a huge, dark figure. It did not move. Who are you? Ichabod stammered. Instead of answering, the shadowy figure slowly moved to the middle of the road. Ichabod could just make out the form of the large horse upon which towered a huge man covered with the dark flowing cloak. Ichabod kicked Gunpowder and dashed forward, but the stranger stayed right behind him. Ichabod slowed his horse to a walk, and the rider slowed also. As the pair topped a hill, the silhouette of Ichabod's companion appeared clearly against the sky. Ichabod's eyes flew open in horror. His companion had no head, and the head, which should have rested on the horseman's shoulders, instead rested in the saddle. Ichabod kicked and whipped and yelled at Gunpowder. Away they dashed, the ghost matching stride for stride. Stones flew, sparks flashed. The riders now approached the road to Sleepy Hollow, but Gunpowder bolted toward the opposite road. This road led across the wooden plank bridge and up the hill to the church with its graveyard. Filled with panic, Ichabod suddenly felt his saddle slipping off. He grabbed Gunpowder around the neck as the saddle slipped to the ground, and the ghostly horse trampled it. Ahead, through the trees, Ichabod could see the church. Gunpowder pounded over the bridge. Ichabod turned around, expecting the ghost to disappear. Instead, the ghost stood up on its stirrups and hurled its head at Ichabod. The schoolmaster tried to dodge the missile, but was hit and fell to the ground. Then the ghostly rider and horses thundered past like whirlwinds. Sunrise found Gunpowder without a saddle or bridle. Outside the master's gate, Ichabod could not be found. After searching the area, local folks found the trampled saddle on the road leading to the church. Beyond the bridge, they found Ichabod's hat, and close by they found a shattered pumpkin. Gossipers and said the schoolmaster had left Sleepy Hollow because he was terrified of the ghost, and he was embarrassed about losing his sweetheart. Katrina married Brom Bones, who always burst into laughter at the mention of the pumpkin, and some people believed that he knew more than he was telling. But the old country wise believed that the schoolmaster was spirited away by supernatural means, and those who passed the bridge on a warm summer evening often fancy they hear the voice of the schoolmaster singing a melancholy tune amid the quiet breezes of Sleepy Hollow.